Hi, I'm Ken Gordon, editor of jbooks.com. I'm here in Peet's Coffee House in Newton Center, Massachusetts, and I am really excited. You want to know why? Over there are two amazing authors, and they're talking. Anita, the Red Tent Diamant, is sitting there with Elinor Lipman, the best-selling Elinor Lipman, and they're talking about Diamant's latest book, Day After Night. You want to hear what they have to say? I do. Come on, let's go.
I'd like to start by asking you, would you just revisit what I heard you say about how you came to discover the detention camp Atlit?
Thank you, and thanks to Peet, and thanks to JBook and Ken, and thank you for saying that. This is I think the first book where I really had a light bulb go off over my head that this is a book. My daughter, who was 15 at the time, was spending a semester in Israel on a semester program, and there was a parents' trip, and my husband and I went. It was our first trip there. We'd never been, and we went on the field trips with them, and we got on the bus and off the bus and on the bus and off the bus, and they were studying the whole of the history of the land of Israel, and they had reached the point of the end of World War II, the founding of the State of Israel. So we went to battlefields and some prisons and some other historic sites. And we got off the bus at this place called Atlit, which is 2 miles or so south of Haifa, which is near the coast. And it was a barbed wire fence enclosed detention camp where the British, under the British mandate when they were in charge of Palestine, interned illegal Jewish immigrants to Palestine because there was a quota, there was a tiny quota. And so they shipped them to this little place called Atlit. They sent them there on boxcars. They sent them there on buses with the windows blacked out, sort of re-traumatizing people who'd been in concentration camps. And they then had to enter a barbed wire enclosure and go through delousing and a lot of things that echoed Holocaust and concentration camp. And we were given this tour. It's a very funky place. It's kind of a living history museum like Sturbridge Village, but there's no coffee shop and there's no gift store. It's pretty basic. And we heard this story about the escape from Atlit, which is what my book recounts from the perspective of these women. And I was sitting on the floor. It was a really hot day. We were inside in a sort of cement kind of bunker, and I really thought, boy, that's a novel. And I could probably come up with the date. It was the fall, it was the spring of 2001, and I could probably look back and find the date. So that's never happened to me before, that I could remember like that.
I want to quote what the Washington Post said. Day After Night demonstrates the power of fiction to illuminate the souls of people battered by the forces of history. And in a slightly longer quote, because one rarely, I think, reads a book that is so utterly satisfying, that is historically accurate, yet so, the arc of that story, I wanted to become a movie producer and make this fabulous movie that I thought would be sort of part Casablanca as the inspector who turns his back on some of the things in order to help the refugees, and part, I don't know, It's a Wonderful Life and Shawshank Redemption, I thought. So I even pitched it to a few people I knew for for no personal gain. But back to the Washington Post, they singled out, and this goes to what I was thinking about, such a satisfying book that a character named Zora, wants to make a new start but can't relinquish the memory of a friend who protected her in Auschwitz, whose death taught her the futility of kindness. She lives to spit in God's eye and vows never again to say a Hebrew prayer. But she rediscovers kindness and altruism through her affection for a Polish Christian who saved a Jewish child. And this is what I'm getting to about the movie. These resolutions are convincing and well-earned. And this is what I want in a novel. I just want a novel. My family teases me about, I'll talk about I remember once someone said to my son, "Did your mother see," and it was some scary movie, and he was about 10, and he said, "No, my mother only sees movies that are affirmation of the human spirit." So that's this book. And I read also one last quote. No, not a quote. I read that Yitzhak Rabin was ordered or planned the escape that is the centerpiece of the book. But he's not in it.
No, he's not in it. He was part of the escape, and he mentions it in his autobiography. It's a very short mention, and it's very heroic. The story that's better known in Israel is the story of the Palmach coming in and rescuing these poor immigrants and marching them out up the Carmel Mountains and into freedom, and there were no casualties, and isn't that wonderful? And partially that's true, but it's not entirely the story, because I found alternative versions. And actually the story that's well known in Israel, which I did not put in the book, is that he was carrying a little child on his shoulders, and the little child peed down his back. But he kept going, of course. But I didn't put that in because I don't know why. I didn't want to. It wasn't his story. This is not his story. This is the story of the refugees who are following behind people, nameless people, soldiers who are their saviors, and they're grateful to them. But they don't know them. They have no relationship with them. They are taken out as and actually one of the characters likens herself, I think, to cattle, although she was also in the position of helping people during the war. So. My perspective was really narrowed to just the characters within the camp, in particular for very young women. But yes, it is that story. It is that Yitzhak Rabin story.
And I read that you were worried about its reception in Israel.
Yes, I was.
But you didn't have to be. I also read that. Yeah.
I was worried about it. I had to really kind of bracket that. Israelis, if you know Israelis, are opinionated as a group, and it's an Israeli story. It belongs to to Palmach and to the founders of the state. And here I am, an American who speaks no Hebrew. I use translators and secondary sources, who's coming in and pretending to tell this story. And I was very nervous about it. I did as much research as I could, and the people who run Atlit were enormously helpful and gave me as much assistance and backup as possible. But it was published in Hebrew a few months ago, and it spent a few weeks on I think it's been about a month and a half on the bestseller list. And I've gotten some really nice emails from Israelis too. So far so good.
And did you meet some actual men and women or both that were, I guess you would say, incarcerated at Atlit?
I met a few. I actually met a woman who lives in Haifa who was there during the breakout, and she was 15 at the time, and her memories are pretty sketchy. Actually, she has very few memories of that night. She remembers going to sleep with being told to go to sleep with her shoes on. And marching and being freed, and then going to a kibbutz someplace, and that was kind of all of her memory. But she had this other wonderful memory of going back to Atlit with her granddaughter on a school trip, and they gave them the choice of being either prisoners or rescuers, and her granddaughter said, "I'll rescue you, Grandma." So that was the memory she really savored about Atlit. And I also met a remarkably lovely man who was in and out of Atlit, who was a Romanian who went back a couple of times after the war to ferry more people out. So he was a kind of a fighter on his own, and lived in the kibbutz at Beit Oren, above where all this happens.
And is it historically known in Israel that the British let this happen, that they looked the other way?
Well, I don't think
the
British let this. There is. My version of the story is founded on, and a lot of the details in the story are founded on unsubstantiated stories that I heard in and around Atlit. There is no way to confirm that the commander of the camp, in fact, let them go. But it's not a stretch to make that surmise, and the people who worked at Atlit had no trouble with my making that surmise. So, and actually the son of the kitchen worker who in my story has an affair said that that's sort of what happened. So, but he wasn't going on the record.